Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do a Friday Reads, where I wrap up the week in reading and talk about any bookish things that have gone on during the week. The big book news that happened this week is that the New York Times Book Review released its 10 best books of 2024. I have a whole video about it. It will be linked in the description box down below if you have not seen it. And this was on the heels of the Washington Post's 10 best books of the year and the New York Times 100 notable books of the year. I have videos about both of those. There will also be down below. I had mentioned that I was hoping to do a reaction video to the Washington Post's 50 notable books of 2024, but I don't actually have a subscription to the Washington Post. So I'm actually locked out of that article and I can't get into it without a subscription, and I'm not subscribing just for one article. So I think I'm not really going to be able to do that video after all. And someone had asked if I was going to do reactions to some of the other categories that the Washington Post did, like the different genres that they have. And I'm assuming, I haven't checked, but if I'm locked out of the 50 notable, I'm probably locked out of the others. So we'll see. I do have one other best of list that has come out that I'm actually kind of behind on. It's been out for a while from Publishers Weekly. I might do that video next week along with a book haul revisit. Those are things you can look forward to. If you have other year-end best lists or that you would like to have reactions to, let me know in the comment section down below. Someone had mentioned the New Yorker's essential books of the year. They always have such a long list. It's a little unwieldy, but if people are interested, we could do that. But let me know if there are other ones that you would like to see in the description box. In the comment section down below. And winter has really set in where I live. It's gotten very chilly, but it's nice that we actually had a fall this year. It seems like a lot of the time either summer just stays really, really late or winter starts really, really early. So we don't end up with a fall. And it was nice that we got that this year. That's really all there is to talk about before we get to the actual Friday Reads portion of this video. So let's dive in. And what a reading week this has been. I finished 4 books. Now, admittedly, I had made good progress on at least one of those books the last time that we spoke. And one of the others is an audio that was really short. But whatever the reasoning, I finished 4 books. And actually, all of them are good. So this will be a fun Friday Reads because I get to talk about 4 very good books. And that is really exciting. So the first book that I finished over the past week was What the Chicken Knows by Sy Montgomery. Joel and I already talked about this in our reading wrap-up for the month of November and video about reading plans for the month of December. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about it here. I will refer to that reading wrap-up, which will be linked down below. It's about an hour long, so if you want to make yourself a cup of coffee, get a cup of tea, your beverage of choice, and just hang out with us for an hour. I had fun filming the video with Joel and Teddy as usual, but we talk about What the Chicken Knows a lot. I just am a huge fan of Sy Montgomery, and this really continued. The only book that was even slightly amiss for me was, I think it was The Hawk's Way. So I've read 2 of her bigger books, Of Time and Turtles and The Soul of an Octopus. Love both of them. There are other books she does that are a lot shorter. Basically, she takes an article that she wrote and expands it into a short book. The audio for What the Chicken Knows is about 2 hours. And The Hawk's Way is the only one that had a slight off feeling in that it feels like something, like the beginning of something, and you kind of wanted more. It feels like the setup for a novel and then you don't get a novel. The Hummingbird's Gift has a beginning and an end. Like there's an arc to it, so it feels a little more satisfying as a short book. And What the Chicken Knows doesn't have that specific arc, but it still has that feel of like a completed story in this shorter book. So I really appreciate it. So that's like the one negative that I would say about any of her books. And still, I find them all delightful. And she reads the audios and is so good at it. So that was the first book that I finished. Delight. I should go back and read some of Cy Montgomery's older books and get to know them. I don't think she does the audios in some, at least her first book, which was The Good Good Pig. But I would be very curious to go back and read some more of her work because I am just such a fan of it. And it has this really great humanity and sense of wonder and curiosity and compassion for the people around her and the animals around her, obviously. And I really deeply respond to that. So the first book I finished was What the Chicken Knows by Cy Montgomery. Actually, I did that with Joel because obviously last week was Thanksgiving here in the United States. And we don't typically do Black Friday. For a long time, our Black Friday ritual, in as much as we had one, was that we would decorate the house for Christmas. And then two things happened. Well, actually, not two things. Really, the big thing that happened was we decided to start decorating earlier. I think 2 years ago, we decorated the week before Thanksgiving so that the tree would be up as part of the Thanksgiving decoration in the house. And we have continued doing that. Or maybe that was 3 years ago. I can't remember. But it's something new that we've done. So we don't actually have something to do on Black Friday. And we would always go out to Montana Book Company on Small Business Saturday. They're always packed. It's one of their busiest days of the year. So you don't even really get a chance to talk to the employees. Everybody's really busy, which is nice. But we heard Black Friday was a little bit less busy. It's still busy, but not as busy. So we started going there. So I live in Missoula. Montana Book Company is in Helena. That's about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive. So we finished What the Chicken Knows before we even got back. We were mostly done with it by the time we got to the store and got to talk to Charlie about it because Charlie is also a huge Cy Montgomery fan. And then we finished it not long after we started driving home. And just, yeah, that was a delight. And it was something that I got to do with Joel. The next book that I finished, I had included it in my November reading wrap-up, but technically I finished the last 30 minutes of the audio of The Snow Child by Éowyn Ivey the morning of December 1st, which I think was Sunday. So it's included in my November wrap-up. It won't be in December, but I technically finished it in December. It's okay. All of this is arbitrary. So I really loved this book. And I did a sort of informal group read of this, very unstructured, but just kind of invited other people. If you would like to read The Snow Child this month, I'll be reading it, and we can kind of talk about it in the comments. And that has been a fun experience. And one person asked if I would do a book club or ever consider doing a book club on Patreon. I feel like maybe at some point I would. I still have a feeling like I'm sort of at capacity right now. So I don't want to add something on top of what I already do, like the full-time job. This is basically at least a part-time job and all of the other responsibilities that I have. I sort of feel like I'm at capacity. It would be fun to do. I'm also such an erratic reader that I'm not sure how easy it would be for me to commit to a book in advance. If it were something that I was going to do, I would really want it to be worth people's time. And that means that I would feel like I would want to be able to really commit to it and dedicate resources to it. So anyway, it's not going to happen anytime soon, but maybe something to think about in the future because the group read aspect of this was fine. So many people read it, and I don't think anybody really said that they didn't like it. If that is you, let me know in the comment section down below. But I think everyone who read this or who had read this in the past has mentioned really loving this book. It's so good. It is just so good. So the premise. Set in 1920 Alaska, you have Jack and Mabel. They have relocated to Alaska from where they had lived, and they have always wanted to be parents. They have a stillborn baby, and they're never able to really get pregnant again. They are dealing with the grief. They're also feeling like they're dealing with judgment from the other people around them that they weren't able to have kids and become parents, that they weren't fulfilling this social obligation, and that Mabel in particular feels that she was a failure. It's interesting because Jen the librarian recently finished this book and had a sort of instinctive reaction to it, where it sort of felt like the argument there is that the only way to live a fulfilling life is to be a parent. And I think that's interesting. It hadn't even occurred to me. I do feel, and Jen kind of came around to thinking of this, I think. I don't want to speak for her, but it's just that Jack and Mabel had always envisioned parenthood as part of their lives. So that is why the grief hit them so hard, that it became something that they had always wanted and had always expected to have in their lives, and then they couldn't have it. So they end up in Alaska, and they have this adorable little scene where Mabel becomes lighthearted. They have a bit of a snowball fight. They decide to make a snowman, and it's really tiny. So they decide, oh, it's a snow child. They decide that it's a girl. They lovingly craft this snow child, and Jack carves a face very carefully into it. They get dried grass to put on the top of the head so it will look like there's blonde hair. And they fashion a skirt. Mabel gets a red woolen scarf and mittens to put on. And in the morning, the snow child is gone. There's just rubble in the snow surrounding where it had been. And there are footprints walking away from the rubble, but none walking toward it. And they start seeing a little girl with blonde hair in a blue coat wearing the red mittens and scarf. And the book is largely ambiguous about whether or not this girl is just a feral child who has ended up in the woods, or if she is a snow child. And I think that is something that has frustrated some people who go in, because I think if you go in expecting a sort of magical fairy tale story, you could easily be disappointed. But I found this to be just a beautiful story. It is beautifully written, and the characters are really great. I feel like you really get to know Jack and Mabel and their neighbors. There's like a real sense of community, even though the community is about 6 people, I guess, technically. And this sense of helping people out, being a good neighbor, being a good member of community is there as well. I mentioned that I in particular, had all the feels hit of being a foster parent, because there's that angle of, Joel and I are 2 men. Obviously, we cannot biologically have a child. So our way of being parents was becoming a foster parent. And we found sort of a long-term situation. But the way it works is that's not your kid. And there's a push and a pull dynamic where you want to be there. You want to be the parental figure, but they are not your kid, and they have their own life. And it's just beautiful. I can't talk about how it ends, but the ending, it really stuck the landing. And I feel like I was very cautious all the way through reading this book, because so much depends on how it ends and what the answers are, if it gives you answers at all. And I think it really ended on a very satisfying note. It really stuck the landing for me. And I've been so gratified hearing that so many people had read along and really enjoyed this book, because I loved it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So much so that I am really looking forward to reading more of Eowyn Ivy's books in the future. So she has a book coming out in February of 2025. By the way, there will be affiliate links to all of the books that I talk about in the description box down below. In this case, it will be a pre-order link, because it doesn't come out until February. But Blackwoods Blue Sky is coming out in February again, and it's sort of a return to Alaska. Eowyn Ivy grew up in Alaska. Obviously, the Snow Child is set in Alaska, and Blackwoods Blue Sky is there. And as the Snow Child sort of takes its inspiration from that fairy tale story about a snow child, Blackwoods Blue Sky sort of takes the story of Beauty and the Beast and uses that as a sort of launching point, but in a pretty grounded way, from what I understand. Chelsea, one of the other co-owner of Montana Book Company, has read Blackwoods Blue Sky and absolutely loved it. and was raving about it when we were at the trade show in Portland. And I mentioned this in the wrap-up that Joel and I did as well. But she recognized Eowyn Ivey on the trade show floor. It like grabbed her because she wanted to tell her how much she had loved this book. And I wish I had read The Snow Child at that point, because I could have like jumped in, and instead I just kind of stood off to the side and smiled like, hi. But I could have totally fanboyed out. But I've heard from multiple booksellers who have had access to Blackwood's Blue Sky that they have enjoyed this as well. One of the co-owners of Chapter One, a bookstore in Hamilton that is a great store, also loved Blackwood's Blue Sky. So this will be out next year. I am really excited to read it. Probably before I get to this, I will try to read this one. So Eowyn Ivey has released 3 books. And the second one was To the Bright Edge of the World, which has a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful cover. So as soon as I finished, I ran out to my local used bookstore. So spoiler for my December book haul, and wanted to see if they had a copy of this. And they did. So I think now that I finished The Snow Child, I'll probably read this one, and then I will read Blackwood's Blue Sky. This one's gorgeous. And, again, I don't want to spoil things for my December book haul, but it's not the best condition for a book, but it has all these fun things. And I'll talk more about that when I do my actual book haul. But so I've become such a fan of Eowyn Ivey that I want to be a completist about her work at this point. The third book that I managed to finish is one that I just finished this morning. I read most of the ending last night and just got so tired that I had to go to sleep. So this morning I finished The Most by Jessica Anthony. And if you have followed my last 2 Friday Reads videos, you know that this is horrifically overdue at the library at this point, because it was due, I think, 2 weeks ago at this point. I have not had a library book be this overdue. I don't think it's happened, at least not as long as we've lived in Missoula. Possibly, I mean, of course, when I was a kid, I had overdue library books, but in my adult life, I don't think I've ever had a library book 2 weeks past its due date. And here I am. Anyway, this is a novella. It's so small you could dunk it in your coffee. I think it's 133 pages. It is 133 pages. If I had really had a chance to just sit down and spend time reading a book, I would have been able to read this in one day, no problem. But I mentioned in my last Friday Reads that I wasn't sure how much reading time I would have over the weekend. And that really turned out to be the case. There was no time to read because Friday we went to Helena and back for Black Friday to spend it with Montana Book Company. Saturday, we got up early and went to a bunch of Christmas craft fairs with our neighbors, and that was a lot of fun. And then Sunday, I don't remember what we did. Because we left Teddy alone for such a long time, we got up, took him on a big adventure, and then when we got home, we filmed our November reading wrap-up. So I just didn't have time to read. So I didn't actually get to pick this up until Tuesday, because Monday was another busy day. And then by Wednesday evening, I was almost... no, I didn't get a chance to read it. I'm completely screwed up. So I didn't actually start it until Wednesday because Monday was a busy day. Tuesday, we were with a friend for dinner. So Wednesday, I made a good chunk of progress. And then last night, Thursday, I almost finished and then did the last 15 or 20 pages this morning. This is a novella set in 1957. You have this married couple, Virgil and Kathleen, and it's set over about an 8-hour period. It's Sunday morning. They get up, and Virgil is getting ready to go to church, and Kathleen announces that she is not feeling well. She does not want to go to church. So Virgil takes the kids, goes to church, comes home, and finds that Kathleen has put on her old red bathing suit from when she was in college and has gotten into the pool in the apartment complex where they're supposed to temporarily be living there, but the amount of time that they have spent is sort of stretching out for various reasons. So she's gotten into the pool, and even though it's November, it's an unseasonably warm day. So the pool happened to be open, and she got in, and she won't come out. And it's not necessarily that she's refusing to come out. Like, she's not getting orders like, get out of the pool right now. And she's saying no. She's just sort of passively remaining in the pool and not coming out. And over this 8-hour period between when Virgil takes the kids to church and then comes back, you sort of shift back and forth in their perspectives. And of course, it shifts back and forth in time as well. So you get a little bit of the backstory. You find out about their relationship to their parents, when they met in college, and the story of their relationship and what has led to this day where Kathleen gets into the pool and doesn't seem to want to come out. It is a really beautiful story, a very good novella. I feel like this is a case where every page matters, and it is a perfect tiny package. You are not left wanting. You are not left feeling like, well, I really wish they had a sort of expanded this or given this a little more time. No, this is a powerful little punch of a book. And again, under ordinary circumstances, I could have just read it in a single sitting, but I that's not the way it went. And it really is a fascinating look at these characters and the relationship, especially being set in 1957. I think one of my complaints about historical fiction, sometimes, not all the time, is that it will feel like an author has done a lot of research into that time period and then in a very ham-fisted way just shoves all of that knowledge into the book, and it's sort of showing off to you about like, I did all this research, so I'm going to throw in all these references to like the type of tires that they're getting and things like that. And this book does it in a very organic way. Like, they will mention, somebody tells Kathleen at one point, you look like that actress. I can't even remember the actress's name because she's someone who's sort of lost to time. These details feel totally organic in the book. It doesn't feel like Jessica Anthony just did a lot of research into how people lived in 1957. It feels almost like a book that was written in 1957, which is the highest praise I can give a work of historical fiction, but with a modern lens on the relationship that they have, although without forcing that modern lens into the book. Like, these people still behave as if they grew up in the era in which they lived, which is another thing that can sometimes annoy me about historical fiction, when characters in the book have inexplicably modern understandings of the world, because that's just not the way it works. And it's not the way Jessica Anthony has written this book. This was longlisted for the National Book Award. I kind of wish that it had made the shortlist. I hope, though, that its inclusion on the long list for the National Book Award will help more people discover this book. I hope, not in a naive way. I don't pretend to be that much of an influencer, but I hope that more people discover this book because I think it's really fascinating. And one of the other things that is happening as the day on which Kathleen gets into the pool is also the day that Sputnik 2 is launched, and Sputnik 2 had the dog Laika on it, and it's sort of commented on because it is a big news event that's happening on this day. But again, it doesn't feel like it's been shoved into the plot to show research. It does feel like it's there for a reason. And when the book explains the title, I just thought it was so clever and really well done. I can't explain the title because it would be a bit of a spoiler. But I really enjoyed this book. And I believe Jessica Anthony has written other books, author of Enter the Aardvark, and 3 previous books of fiction, most recently Enter the Aardvark. It doesn't say what the other 2 books are, but I would be really curious to read another one. So there's Enter the Aardvark, Chopsticks, and The Convalescent. But I would be fascinated to read another book of hers because this is so tight and perfect. And in the way of Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, it just feels like a wonderful short book that just packs a really powerful punch. And I it's hard to say because I feel like I'll be thinking about this book for a while, but we'll have to wait and see. if that actually comes to pass. But what an intelligent, well-written book. I hope that more people will read and discover this, because I think it was really good, and it's short, it's easy to read, so, consider it. And then I was listening to the audio of The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimons this week, and actually I also finished that one this morning. So I crept 2 books just under the wire. I finished both The Most and The Passing Playbook this morning. The Passing Playbook is another book that is just really fascinating, and it's a YA rom-com. And there are definitely ways in which you can sort of tell that it's a YA rom-com, because you have Spencer, who is transgender, and is switching schools. After transitioning, Spencer had been out at his former school, because it's hard not to be out when you actively transition. The experience of being out at his former school was not great. He was kind of bullied. Things didn't really go well. So his parents have they've relocated. They've changed schools for him, and his younger brother Theo has also had to change schools, which is a whole thing because Theo is autistic. Change is very difficult for him, and there are a lot of layers of things going on. I made a joke to Joel at one point talking about this book where, kind of like Stefan from Saturday Night Live. It's like, this book has everything, because you have a transgender protagonist, you have an autistic younger brother, you have the love interest who is growing up in an extremely religious family. It's got everything. And so basically in this new school, Spencer has decided that he wants to pass. But on his first day, he is sort of presented with an opportunity to try out for the soccer team. And he decides to take that opportunity against the wishes of his parents, who kind of point out, like, this could be something that outs you. Why don't you just wait, settle into the school, and see how you feel at the end of the school year? And Spencer decides to sort of try out anyway. What I was getting at, actually, is that the protagonist and the love interest, whose name is Justice, have that situation where there's a misunderstanding when they first meet, where they think they don't like each other, and then they are forced to spend a lot of time together. And the mechanism through which they are forced to spend time together is clumsy. It feels like a contrivance of the plot, 100%. But it kind of doesn't matter, because it is a young adult book, and ultimately I just really enjoyed this book. It also has that thing sometimes people will complain about, where you'll have a rom-com involving a transgender character, especially a young adult one, where a lot of the figures turn out to be supportive or turn out to be allies along the way. And I feel like I'm okay with it, because at the end of the day, the people who have that reaction are reacting as people should when presented with someone who is transgender and wants to be able to compete in soccer. So the barrier on the soccer team is that Spencer's birth certificate says female, and Spencer lives in a state where he can't change his birth certificate, which means that he will not be allowed to compete. And Spencer essentially has to decide, do I want to continue passing, or do I need to come out, challenge this system that is unfair, and see if I can help other transgender students who might be coming behind me? And it's a really interesting question. And I think that's also why I can overcome the sort of clumsy contrivance that forces Spencer and Justice to spend a lot of time together, and the somewhat optimistic worldview, because it's grappling with a really interesting question that I think all queer people have to struggle with in their lives, which is how out there do you want to be? Like, would you rather live your life on your own terms quietly, or do you need to push the system and be more of an activist? And it's not fair that you might have to be an activist, because not everybody wants to do that. Some people just want to be quiet and left alone. But when you live a life that is condemned by a lot of people in society, or a lot of people don't believe should be allowed to exist, sometimes you have to push back. It's a question of level, I guess. Like, you either remain in the closet and try to hide any evidence that you are part of this community, or you try to live quietly and not really be fully out, maybe out with just your close friend group, or you just become an activist. And it walks that line in a very interesting way. And it prompted a lot of that, because, like I said, I think any member of the queer community has had to have that debate with themselves, at least at some point. And it's not necessarily in the same way that coming out is not something that you do once. You have to come out your whole life again and again and again, because you will continue to meet new people. And how and when you tell them that you are gay, or if you tell them that you are gay, or whatever part of the queer community you are, transgender, lesbian, intersex, bisexual, what have you, however you decide to do it, if you decide to do it, it just keeps happening throughout your life. And there will be moments where you will have to make decisions about whether to pass or push against something. Like, if you're sitting at a Thanksgiving table and somebody says something horrifically racist or transphobic or homophobic, you have to make a decision in the moment about whether or not you try to keep the peace and not be controversial when you're not the person who's wrong. The person who said the horrible thing is wrong. But you have to decide, is this something that I want to challenge right now in this moment? And if I challenge it, can I make somebody else's life better? And I thought that was really interesting. So I really appreciate everything that The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimons did. I think it's a really interesting YA rom-com. I had to wait months, about 3 months, I think, for my hold to become available on Libby. And I think Joel just got on the wait list, so hopefully he'll get it quickly, because I would love to talk to him about the book. But I thought it was great, and I would hope that more people will read it. I think, if you are someone who is transgender, it might not feel new or urgent or relevant to you, because you've lived your life, you've experienced a lot of these things. But I think for anyone else, even people who are part of the queer community, it feels like an important read, because it prompts a lot of interesting discussion about how to be a good person in the world and stand up for other people around you, and when it's important to do that. So those are the 4 books that I finished this week. As I said, every single one was good. I would recommend every single one of them, pretty unqualified. There are circumstances where, if you're really not into nonfiction, maybe you wouldn't like What the Chicken Knows. If you don't like books that sort of play with elements of fairy tale, but aren't strict fairy tale retellings, you might not like The Snow Child. And I can see somebody not enjoying the most as much as I did. But, I by and large, I give all of these unqualified recommendations. So, which is nice. It's nice when that happens. What am I going to do next? First, let's talk about the audiobook that I'm going to do now that I finished The Passing Playbook. I had mentioned in the November reading wrap-up that I had been thinking about cashing in a credit on Libro for this book, I Might Be in Trouble by Daniel Ailman, which was released on December 3rd in hardcover. I got this advanced reader's copy at that trade show in Portland. And this morning, I cashed in a credit on Libro to get a copy of the book, because we decided I will listen to it first, and then Joel might listen to it once I am done. So this should be fun and interesting. Basically, the premise of this one is that you have a gay man who has written one successful book and now has total writer's block. He has a hookup, and in the morning wakes up and the man he brought home is dead. And chaos ensues. because instead of calling the police, he calls his agent, and they are trying to figure out what happened. And the agent has an idea that maybe they can use this experience to write his next book. And I don't do a whole lot of mystery or thriller books, but something about this just sounds like it could be fun and a bit escapist. So we'll see how that goes. I haven't actually started it yet, but I will be starting it. That will be my next audio. I still have 2 library books that I need to get to. The first one I'm probably going to pick up is Susanna Clarke's The Wood at Midwinter. This is a tiny little thing. It has illustrations, and it is, I want to say, in the neighborhood of 60 pages. It is 60 pages exactly, with an author's note from Susanna Clarke included. And it should be very quick. I don't know what time I'm going to have to read this weekend, because tomorrow we have to get up. Teddy has a haircut. Joel and I have a haircut. So we'll be out and about. And then Sunday, we're going to be spending a lot of time with a friend. So once I get a chance to sit down, this should go very quickly. And that's why I'm planning to do this one first. And I also have Ready or Not by Andy Peretta, which is a YA graphic novel that should be a lot of fun as well. So I will start I Might Be in Trouble, and then I will work my way through these, and then I'll start thinking about how I'm going to wrap up 2024 as a year in reading, because we are at that point. There's not all that much time left, so it's time to start thinking about how we're going to close out the year. That's about it for Friday Reads this week. I would love to hear what you've been up to reading this week or watching. Yeah, it's weird that this is the first Friday that we won't have a Bake Off episode, and I'm gonna miss it. I enjoyed the most recent season of the show. No spoilers. We have been watching the 8th season of Canadian Bake Off on YouTube, and they haven't posted the final episode, and that is annoying. So, that's kind of what we've been watching this week. But anyway, let me know what you've been up to in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.